The last area is the rendering options. This will also let you save what you've created. We'll get into these buttons once we start doing a project, and the same goes with the rendering list. All right, I've kind of explained what they are. Let's start from the beginning. Let me clear the background. Now, as I said, my reason for using Composite Studio is to take a vertical image that normally would have black on either side of it, or possibly even all around it, and place it in a nice looking background with a drop shadow and a frame. Now the first thing I do is I select the background. Now here's a nice feature about this program. I'm going to press image. See, I've already cleared it. I'm starting with a brand new cleared screen. I press image. Now it automatically opens for me into my hard drive called DH3 into a directory that I called BEST, B-E-S-T, FS, which stands for frame stores. These are the ones I've used the most, so I put them in one directory to make them easier to find. Now, it's my default directory, and the way you set a default directory is you have a little line down here, a little button, looks like a little arrow at the bottom. You press that, and this lights up, which says Set as Preset Directory. So what you do is you go to the directory that you're going to use most often, or if you're working on a project that you're going to be working with that particular project, and you go to it. Let me close this a second. You go to it just the way you would in any other program that allows you to press your volumes and your parents. For instance, that was on DH3, so I press volumes. Now these are all my hard drives for the toaster and flyer system. I go to DH3. I look for the directory called Best Frame Store. Now, here is another thing that I mentioned to Dave again when I first got this. There's no differentiation between a file and a directory. Notice? Well, these are all files. I should say these are all directories. However, if there were a mixture of directories and files, well, here's a good one. Disk, info, we know that's a file, but it looks the same as from zip, which is actually a directory. You just have to know what are your directories, what you called them, and what are your file, and which ones are your files. All right, let's go back to Best Frame Store. I'm going to click that on. Now I'm inside. You see, now it shows me in my path, DH3, Best Frame Stores, Best FS. Okay, this is the one I wanted to set. So before I do anything else, I come over here, I press this button, and then I set it as number 1. Now it's the default. Whenever I click on this particular heading, like up here, load, and I click on image, it will always go to this directory. Now I can also preset 4 other directories. So if I'm working with several that I want to use, I can do the same thing. I go to them, I click on this little button, and then I select the number that I want it to be. For instance, I've already pre-selected number 2, that's DH1, that's one of the list of other frame stores out of Club Toaster. My numbering system, or my naming system, is CT, Club Toaster, Frame Store 2. I break them up because there's so many. I have Club Toaster F all the way up to 8. I have 8 different directories with all the Club Toaster frame stores. All right, over here if I press number 3, that'll jump to another one. Number 4 jumps yet to another, and number 5 to yet another. So you can preset the directories, which saves you a lot of time hitting your volume and your selecting and then going into a subdirectory. Well, it's kind of like the tabs on the toaster. Think of it that way, where you're on the toaster, on the flyer, where you want to go directly to your directory, and you preset those on the tabs below. So that's the same thing you have here. And he did it before the flyer. Okay, let's go back to where we were. Background. I'm going to use 3 lights as a background, so I'm selecting that. Now, I might also mention that if you're going to use multiple images and they happen to be in the same directory, you can select them all at the same time. For instance, I can select bird, I can select bricks, and if you'll notice, every time I select one, that name appears up here. Now let me show you what happens. When we're all done, we'll just press done, and up here right now I have the bricks as the image that's selected. However, I can go over here to the image. All right, I can cycle through the different images that I've selected by just pressing this button. There's bird, there's bricks, and there's three lights. Three lights, bird, bricks. I have all three. All right, we said we wanted to use the three lights, so I'm going to select that. Now, remember I said that this back button, normally, if I press that, would make this full screen, and it would make it the background. However, the current version of Toaster Paint, for some reason, this feature doesn't work. So what I found I can do, oh, I forgot to show you about these two scrubbers. Let me show you them now. Is I come over here and I make this, I pull this scrubber over, and notice as I pull it, this yellow light is getting bigger. This represents the size of your image. I pull this all the way to the right, and I've now made this full screen. All right, let me explain these two little scrubbers. I didn't get into that, and I'll do it right now. This allows you to size your image. Now, I'm pulling this, and you'll kind of notice that it's keeping the same proportion. As I'm pulling it, the overall proportion is staying the same, probably a 4:3. If I press this button, in fact, this little scrubber is grayed out. If I press this button, it now allows me to adjust the image in two directions, which means it no longer will stay proportional. I could stretch it, so if I do this, the image will actually be stretched. It may not, in fact, we do this, the image will actually appear stretched on the screen as opposed to being simply cut off at the, as opposed to being a certain size. This will actually distort the image by doing it this way. So I'm going to keep this always on proportional setting because I'm not looking to stretch or distort my images. And I come back over here and I make this full screen. Also, well, I'll get into this on brushes. All right, now I've made this full screen. I come over here and I save it. Very important that you press that button before you go to anything else. If not, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble as far as trying to figure out what you've done. Okay, now we're going to go over here. We're going to select a brush. So I press this little arrow, which I mentioned before will cycle between images and brushes. Now the word brushes appears up here. I press in the middle of this. Get in the habit of pressing in the middle. That way there's no chance that you're going to press in the arrow area. Press in the middle. And again, another requester opens up. And I believe this is the brush that I want to use, this particular number. Notice another thing, as I think I mentioned earlier, whenever I save a brush, so that I don't confuse it with a frame store or an IFF file, I always name it exactly what it is. When I cut out a brush, I put the extension name of brush on there. I don't have to put the dot, but I will put the word brush after it so that I know it's a brush. Okay, I'm going to click that on. Also, I could preset this location if I wanted to. So I'm going to set that right now. And that means that anytime I now open up the brush menu, why it's going to come to this directory. Okay, I'm going to press done. Now I've got this image, and it tends to copy the previous image. So the previous one was full screen. This has done the same thing, so I'm going to make it a little smaller. And as I make it smaller, you'll notice that by its outline, we can tell this is a vertical image. All right, now I'm going to center this. Now, I don't center it by touching it over here. This is again an area where you can get confusing. If I were to press this, the whole screen would kind of go yellow and I'm not quite sure what I've done. So you come over here and I can move this where I want it. As I move this black rectangle, it represents the image over here. So I move it to the right, and this of course is moved to the right. I move it to the left, etc. Now, as I said, I want to center it, so I come down here to my center button and I click that, and now it's centered. Now, I know about where my television cutoff is because I've been working with this for so long, but if you want to find out just how big you can make that image, you can press this button and also come back and press the black rectangle, and you'll notice here's the television cutoff, which is just about where I had made my image. In fact, I was about to increase the size of this image, so I'll increase it to about there. And now I know that that image is in my safe area. And I can go larger than that, but on some monitors it might be cut off because whatever you see here is the frame that will be created. All right, I like to get rid of this cutoff because it just gets to be annoying, so I'm going to press that again, and I'll press the rectangle again just to bring back my image.